Okay, I've got this installed, the gauges installed, they're in the dash. Now what do we do? I've got this camera set up the best I could here, so please bear with me. I've got it kind of leaning on the steering column. But most of the stuff you'll need to see is on the Speedo and Tech. So here's what we've got. So what we're going to do is we're going to start the vehicle up. Okay, so we've got quite a few things we can show you here. I'll just put a shadow on there. So everything will do a full sweep and then return to, whatever the current reading is. So what we've got here is there's a whole bunch of features you can use. You don't need to use all these features. I think the first thing we'll start on is, let's start with the tachometer. So to get into our setup mode on our tachometer, what we're going to do is we're going to hold in the button while turning on the key. There we go. Okay, we're going to hold in the button while turning on the key. Enter setup mode. So from here, we can access all kinds of things. So I just put the buttons here so you can see them easier when I'm pushing them. So we've got our setup menu. That's our set cylinders. I can go into there. It's set to 8 currently. We can choose 10, 12, 1 if you're going coil on plug, 2 for whatever reason, 4. A lot of times you'll need that for an LS setup out of a GM PCM, 6-cylinder, 8-cylinder. So we're going to select 8. Hold that in. You want to set it? Yes. Push the button. Saved. This next one is the input filter. You may or may not need this depending on which filter you have. You can scroll low, medium, high. You can use your instruction book to figure that one out. Right now we've got this one set on low. Yes. Saved. Next one's a shift alert. What we can do is we can set a sequential shift alert. Basically what this will do is it will tell you 500 RPMs before you need to shift, and it'll tell you when to shift, and it'll display it on the screen, which is pretty cool. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to set this up for my red line at, I don't know what it is on here, so I'm just going to set it at 5,500. Just to be safe. Set, yes. And you tap once to scroll, and then you hold it to select. Okay, saved. Shift alert, tach speed setup. Now these come these all ship as far as I know. I'm gonna hold up in the button to get into the tach speed setup. There's street, and then there's sport mode. Your street mode will give you more of an OE type reaction. Your vehicle, while you're in the driveway revving it, the tach might not keep up, but on the road it'll be fine. What this will do is if you have a really low cam and you don't want to see that tachometer moving all over the place at idle, excuse me, the street is the way to go. If we want to go sport, that's going to be much more reactive, much faster. You're revving up in the driveway or whatever, the tach will respond much more quickly. We're going to leave this in street mode. Set. Okay, that's set. Auxiliary inputs. So New Vintage has different ways that you can display gauges right on these screens. And you can do that in this menu, and there's a couple different ones on that. So you can display any temperature or pressure on here. All you need is a temperature sender or a pressure sender, and they'll show up the gauges on here. So trans temp, oil temp, another water temp, pressure, boost. You don't need an extra box or driver. You just need those inexpensive senders, and it'll show it right on the screen. aux2, so the tach will show 2 gauges on the screen. The Speedo will show 1 gauge on the screen. So you can have up to 3 extra gauges already in this kit. So you can actually have a 9 gauge kit if you wanted to. Icon 1. Now this is a pretty cool feature too, is you can select in here a whole bunch of warning icons. Another check engine light, parking brake, all kinds of things. So the tach has 3 warning indicators around the pointer here. The Speedo has 3 indicators built in. It has a turn signal and the high beam down at the bottom. So you can have a whole bunch of different icons display on this screen and on this screen, same type of setup, which is pretty cool. So you can have a lot of functions, or you don't need to have them all. It depends on what you're doing. So we've got our icons, and that would be the revision of the software that we're running. So that's that. Okay, so now we're going to get out of that. We're going to set up our speedometer. Same process, holding the button while turning on the key. In the setup mode, I'm going to push the button and we're going to do some of the same stuff. Holding the button, turn on the key, get in the setup mode. Service reset. What this is you can set the service mileage. So you want to do you want to reset the mileage for changing your oil or whatever type of thing. That's really nice to have, just like a modern vehicle. Manual calibrate. What that can do is, if you know how many pulses are coming out of your PCM, you can manually set that up. New Vintage ships all these at 16,000. That's pretty common across the industry. We're going to leave that set at 16,000 because we're using our GPS speed sensor on here. So I'm going to hold in the button to select it, and then tap it. I can just change them to whatever I want. Holding the button, holding the button, holding the button. See, our speedometer is not sure what we're doing. Yes. Saved. Manual calibrate. This is where if you need to do a drive a mile feature, which is really handy, no matter what sender or signal you've got coming, you can get into this menu. There's some videos on this. Hold the button in, drive a mile, hit it again, and you're done. Very simple. Input filter, same deal as the TAC. We've got low, medium, and high. We've got this one set on low for the GPS sender, just like it says in the instructions. Yes. Saved. Service set, this is where you would set the mileage. So let's say you want to change the oil every 5,000 miles, you would set it in here. Then you can do that whenever you want. Set odometer, this is a cool feature. I'll show you that in a second. Within the first 100 miles, you can set the odometer to match your vehicle mileage. That way you don't have to change your title or anything like that. Auxiliary input setup, same thing as on the TAC. You can display up to one extra gauge on here, and then you can also show up one icon. So you can show one gauge or icon, two gauges. There's two inputs on here, one on here. So you can choose a gauge or an icon, or you can choose any combination, two gauges, two icons, one icon, one gauge, whatever you want on there. It's pretty cool. And that's the rev. Okay, now let's restart these gauges. Okay, so here's some other cool features. On the speedometer side, you got an 1/8 mile timer, 1/4 mile timer, 0 to 60 time. You can blank out your screen if you just don't want to look at anything. There's our mileage that we set. That's our trip meter that we already did. That's the service, so that's how many miles I've gone since I've reset the service. That shows digital miles per hour, digital kilometers per hour. So if you go across the border, all you gotta do is hit the button. Don't look at that, that's our peak speed. Voltage, and we're back to that. So I'm gonna go back to the, I like to see the miles per hour on here. And then on the tachometer, we've got our hours. That's our service hours. So you can do the same thing on here. This is engine running. So if you want to change the oil or do some service at a certain time interval of it running, you can do that, and you can reset that as well. It's our peak RPM. Oh, that must be what the red line set it in the Terminator, so I'll reset it to that. Voltage, blank screen also if you don't want to look at anything, and then our mileage. So there's a lot of things packed in here. So let's go drive around and see what we got. First thing we're going to do is we're going to set the mileage on this. So this vehicle had 208,400 miles. And within the first 100 miles, you can set the mileage on these. So here's our programming buttons. We put them here so you can see what we're doing. So I'm going to do is I'm going to hold the button while turning on the key. We're going to enter setup mode. We're going to scroll to set odometer, holding the button, one time set yes, 2, we're going to hold in the button, go to the next button, next number, O, hold in the button, then we're going to tap it to advance, 8. 4. 0. 0. Hold it in. Yes. Saved. Okay, now let's see what it says on the screen. There we go. Now we don't have to change our title on our vehicle when we sell it or whatever, and it's all where it should be. Hopefully my phone doesn't fly out the window. Maybe I'll roll up the window. Fuel level looks correct. Temperature looks correct. Oil pressure looks correct. Volts look good. Tach looks correct. Turn on these lights because I love looking at them at night. Go down this dirt road here. I don't know if you can see this over here, but we can see how the screen over here is showing different numbers than the gauges. So that's telling us we need to look at this Holley system, make sure we have the right senders in, make sure we have the right settings in there. I don't think something's correct there. Roll the window a little bit. GPS speed sender works good at low speeds. It's pretty good all around. It's an easy workaround for things like that aren't quite right. You know, if it's too difficult sometimes to get a speed signal. I think it fell down in the dash and it's still working. Look at that. Got our different timers, different speeds, volts. That was our 1/8 mile time last run. 1/4 mile time, we'll have to do that. 0 to 60. Oh, I did 1/8 mile. That was my problem. There's our mileage. Okay, let's get out on the open road here. Let's go around the block. Across the road. So now that we're just cruising down the road, I've got plenty of air flow through the radiator. I can see that my temp is going to hold right at 180. So that's telling me that this gauge is probably correct, or is correct, and that this screen over here says I have 193 degrees coolant temperature. So I'm going to look into this Holley to make sure I've got the right temp sender chosen, make sure I ordered the right temp sender, and And but that's why I like to use standalone gauges, because it's telling you everything you need to know. Got about 50 psi of oil here. This is only showing about 24. So either I've got the wrong sender, a bad sender, or I've got the settings incorrect in here. So that's why I like standalone gauges. They come with all the things that match. That way you know 100% what you've got. You notice the fuel gauge moves a little bit as we're driving around, as we go over bigger bumps, but notice it's not banging all over. So it's moving, it's reacting quickly so that you know what's going on, but not so quickly that it's going to annoy you. Bolts look good. 14.3, that's about what this says. RPMs look the same. 1500, 1500, that's all good. Downshift, see if we can get our shift alert to go off. There you go. And then the final step would, so it'll give you one arrow at 1000 before, 2 arrows 500 before, and then the screen will say shift when it's time to shift. I just ran out of road here. Alright, we'll turn around and go back. Here. Again, you can see we're holding at 180, so that's telling me that to look at this screen over here, or the sender on the Holley system. Now, could the two sides of the engine be running slightly different? Yeah, a little bit, but I don't know about 15 degrees. So, plus the temp sender for the gauge is on the back of the block, which is farthest away from the inlet, so that's telling me that should be the warmest part. Change this LED to blue. Do some adjustments on this GPS, seems a little slow to react, so I'll change the filter on that later, because that's pretty reactive usually. At 180, it still says 193, so I feel pretty confident that the gauge is correct, just because that T-stat's 180, and it holds right there, so that's telling me the gauge is probably correct. As far as the installation on this, the only hiccup we had was hooking up to the speed signal on the Holley, which we have figured out. We'll do that in a separate video. That's kind of a more complicated process. But for the most 90% of people, you either pick up the speed signal out of the GM PCM, or if it's a manual, just pick up it off the speed sender, or even a TH250 or TH400, just pick it up off the speed sender in the trans. Or NV4500. But the Holley already has an 8-cylinder signal. The LS has a 4-cylinder signal. We have all the, or NV has all the instructions for that. not getting too bouncy. Pretty happy with this install. Went pretty well. No glitches. Everything worked right out of the box. We didn't have to make any adjustments or do anything odd. Everything fit right in. Everything was pretty simple to calibrate. Sorry, it's getting a little bouncy dirt road. But just a couple of key things to remember when you're doing an install on these is lights, make sure you hook it up to the parking signal. Oh, there's some kids up here. Probe your wires, like in the previous video, to find your wires. There's our neighbor. Now look at the back of your cluster if you don't have a wiring diagram. Follow the color-coded wiring on the back of the gauges, and then on this little shifter, that's pretty straightforward. Just screws right in. Here's some more neighbors. But love the looks. Love the replacement of what was in there before. Easier for me to read than a little screen. And then this will be what will drive the rest of the custom work that we do on this vehicle with the colors and things like that, just to kind of tie it all together.